Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of, I haven't been drinking, honestly, the latest edition of Free Thought Hour. Now, we have our usual co-host, so I'd like to welcome Tercia to the show. How the devil are you in your darkened room?
Yes, I'm not photosynthesizing right now, and I apologize for any background noises. The fan on the converter is making a noise, and Donnie's working next to me because we're making ample use of what power we have in darkest South Africa tonight. But I'm all right. I'm doing well. Thanks. And yourself?
Well, I thought darkest Africa was more in the middle than on the south. Never mind.
Apparently not.
I'm okay, thank you very much. Shall we bring on our guest tonight? I'd like you to introduce her, if you will, please, Tercia, because you're the one who knows her and who captured her for our show. Here she is. Say
Hello,
something,
Elsabe. Hello, Elsabe. So this is the first time that Elsabe and I have interacted almost in person. I will drive through to Cape Town, the other side of my mountain, and go and meet her one day soon, I hope, and meet her dogs and meet the cross neighbor who complains about noise. So Elsabe is a South African science journalist. She has particular interests, and the one that captured me. There were two things, actually. The one was she was very active during the pandemic, which is, by the way, still with us. It's not as if it's over. Writing about vaccines, and I always found her work very insightful. And then, perhaps in a more romantic way, the work that Elsabe's done on Emily Hobhouse, I find very endearing and touching. And when I spoke to John about getting Elsabe on as a guest, I told him that the work about Emily Hobhouse was something that was really close to my heart, because I'm also very fond of history and women in history. And Elsabe, did you know that John didn't have any idea who Elsabe Hobhouse was?
Shame.
So maybe we can educate this British gentleman tonight. So Elsabe, it's a great honor for me to have you as our guest, and we've been planning and working on this for a couple months. We had a setback when your mom passed away. Sorry about that, and but eventually we are here. Swedish Steve is our producer from Sweden, and I have to tell you, Elsabe, that Swedish Steve speaks Afrikaans, so be careful what wonderful. You and I say. Yes, he's very good, and his favorite band is actually who's that? Oh, come on, Swedish Steve, tell me. I've got oh, come on.
It's not ABBA. I can say that. Not ABBA.
The Antwoord is,
okay.
So that's where he's learned a lot of his Afrikaans. He's our producer, and he's in Sweden. So Elsabe, I will hand you over to John, because I love the way John asks the question he always asks our guests. So John, come on, do your thing.
Oh dear. Well, first of all, am I saying your name right? Is it Elsabe?
Yes.
Elsabe?
Elsabe.
Great.
Okay. Come on, you trained. I sent you a voice note yesterday. Voice note. I said Elsabe Brits. And I even focused on the soft R or the hard R. But you're doing it perfectly well. Not too badly. I'll give you 95%.
Good. Thank you. Well, that's good enough for me. Okay. So what interests us about our guests at the beginning of these shows is their journey. Have you had to get to be the person you are today an interesting story?
Oh my word. Okay. An interesting story. I don't know. Years ago, when I was like, well, I think it's actually stupid that one must make a career choice when you 17, isn't it? Because you haven't lived yet. And suddenly you ask, what do you want to do for the rest of your life when you're 17? So I actually, I was interested in the sciences. I matriculated in 1990. And then I actually wanted to write. and decided to, okay, let's try journalism.
Mhm.
And it was quite a shock when I learned very early on I actually need to work with people. When you're a journalist, something that I don't particularly enjoy, and that you're not actually going to write, you're going to gather information and relay it to other people in a way that they more often than not, is not going to like. And they hear it's a mirror of society shown in their faces. It's like very dark art, and they see what they don't like, and they will blame the messenger. And
Yes.
it was quite a shock for me. But then I studied it, and then I landed in a very small town in, well, they call it a city. It's actually a small town in the north of the country. In 1993, at my first job at a community newspaper in Petersburg. Today it's called Polokwane, and learned very hard life lessons there. But it was good. Saw the first elections there in '94, and stayed there for 6 years. And the newspaper was sold, and then I landed about 2,000 kilometers south in Cape Town, when I continued my journey, and was a crime and court reporter for quite a while. Now,
Mhm.
crime reporting in South Africa is not crime reporting in the UK.
Oh,
It differs. It's bloody, it's violent, and you can have several murders a day.
oh, I see. Yes,
Yeah, no,
more,
it's different.
it's more intense. Yes,
It's
I can
it's
see.
very intense. But
Yes.
I learned a lot, and I learned a lot in the High Court.
Hmm.
And yeah, you run around, and it was before GPS and all those wonderful things. So you sit with a photographer,
Hmm.
who most often those days were men. We had 2 or 3 women, and the men wanted to drive. So there's no chance of you to drive, and you sit with a map book on your
Yes.
lap with an address, and as you drive, you navigate and hope you get into, at your right correct
Mm.
destination.
Yes.
And there was a lot of violence. There were bomb explosions, there were gang related violence, and all sorts of horrible things, but also a good learning experience of meeting from the poorest of poor people living in informal settlements like they still do, to very rich people.
Hmm.
And yeah, that was actually a terrible time. And then I had an interest in science, and
Hmm.
then the newspaper didn't have a science reporter, and I decided, well, I want to change, and that's how
Hmm.
I landed with science reporting.
That must have been a bit of a relief after what sounds like a hairy nature, the job
Yeah.
of being a crime reporter in South Africa. Do you know?
Yeah. It was quite. It is, and it still is a heavy duty job to be a crime or a court reporter in the
Yes.
country. Once, in one court, I was still in court, and I was covering the 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 murder of the former president's wife, Marika de Klerk. FW de Klerk's
Oh,
former
yeah.
wife was
Yeah.
murdered. And
Hmm.
I was sitting in court, and the court next to me was another colleague covering um, a, a terrorism case, and some of the people escaped from the court. The next moment, there were people running in with heavy armored guns and stuff, and they said we must evacuate the court. And we thought, well, once we outside the court, we're not going to get the story. The story is now inside, because
Mm.
they're never going to allow you in. And we decided to to hide underneath the court benches, and while they're running around, and that's how we got our story. We got many stories, like that.
You're lucky you didn't get some bullets too, it sounds.
One or two we had. In another case, we had bullets at the hostage drama. There were bullets flying. But yeah, luckily you're young. I was young. I was in my late 20s, and you have
Mhm.
the stamina to do that. But
Mm.
now I turned 50 in December, and I don't have the stomach for that anymore.
Yes. Well, I think I'm a retired science teacher, and I
Yeah.
think that science journalists are in the same business, really, because both of us, you and I, are in the business of trying to simplify the complexities of science to make them palatable by non-scientists.
Yes.
I want to ask you something about this, Elsabe. You, being a crime writer and being in places where you must have been, except for that case, there must have been other cases as well where you were really in limit or different varying degrees of physical danger. I mean, I know what Langa looks like. I know what townships are like. And we know that taxi violence is rife, and you can be quite innocently be drawn into a very violent situation. But interestingly enough, I want to ask you, when did you get the most hate mail, as a crime reporter or as a science writer?
As a science writer, not
Really
as a crime writer. Yeah. I
interesting.
think that the landscape has changed immensely in this country. I think that people also get a lot of hate mail and also threats that are real are the political journalists today. Those who do the in-depth into corruption and state capture and those things. But I actually can't comment on that. I just know from the
Yeah.
colleagues. And I don't know anything about politics or economics, so I can't comment on that. But today, the landscape is really, really bad for them, and I take my hat off for them who do those. But obviously, the landscape of the science journalist, when it was like in 2009 with Darwin, Darwin one celebration 150. And there was a lot of activity and a lot of fantastic international speakers who came to South Africa, his great grandson, and wonderful people. And then I thought, oh, it's bad, the hate mail, and actually mail that attacks you personally. But it was 10 times worse with COVID and the anti-vaxxers.
Yeah, that's probably because everybody had more time to spend at their keyboards since they were locked down, they couldn't do much else. So who is it sends you the hate mail as a science reporter? Where's it coming from?
So 4 years ago, I decided to leave the Media 24 for whom I worked. It was first the 6 years at the community newspaper, and then I got it transferred to the largest company, Media 24, for whom I worked for 21 years. So I was more exposed to that when I worked for Media 24, because you're in an office and I had a landline and people could just phone.
Yes.
And then I decided to become freelance. But in that environment, when people were still able, when they were still sending faxes and letters, and there was, then it was quite hectic, and people could phone you. And we didn't give out our cell phone numbers before. The secretaries would shield some of the calls coming in, which I'm forever grateful for our wonderful editorial secretary that shielded some of the calls, and then some couldn't get through. But it's random people. It's not people that I know or that I've met before. It's random.
Do they not have a similar agenda amongst themselves? I mean, are they not criticizing you from the point of view of their perception of how the world works rather than the scientific one?
No, of course. And now with social media, it's 10 times worse. I mean, 15 years ago, when people sent you a fax, you could look at it, glance, and throw it in the dustbin.
Yes.
But there wasn't another person who knew that they sent a fax and they could respond to it.
Yes.
It's with social media, it can become quite toxic.
Yes. So I don't know what sort of print you work for. I imagine as a freelance, you can sell your services to a number of different journals. But my attitude towards some science journalists, and I think these are the ones that publish in the gutter press, is that they're going for sensationalism rather than truth. Do you find that a difficult line to walk? Because you want to sell copies, don't you? But And science, without exaggeration, can be a bit boring. So,
A very good point that you make. But are there science journalists writing for the gutter press? For example, do they call themselves science journalists when they write for
no,
the Express or the Daily Mail?
no,
Is it a science journalist or is it somebody at the general desk just
yeah.
not writing science?
It sounds more like a non-scientist, doesn't it? Yes.
Yeah, non-science journalist. It's someone who we saw during COVID that there were a lot of reports. It's always been it's the same like the health media who
Mm,
would write something about I don't want to say a specific product now. They'd be a product and they'd say this fantastic product,
mm,
it cures everything, and it will help. It will lower your blood pressure. It will
mm,
be good for your diabetes. It
mm.
could do something. These quackery products, it's the same
Yes.
thing. It's somebody that's supposedly a health journalist,
Mm,
and they would get a product for free, which I never take.
yes.
If it's sent to me, I send it back, or I just don't take it.
Mm,
That says, well, this is a wonderful product. If you don't take it, you'll get a heart attack
yes.
tomorrow. Or multivitamins and microvitamins, microminerals. You need it. You need to take that. It's basically pseudoscience. I don't
Yes.
see those people as science journalists. There is a smallish kind of international groups that people belong to, associations that are real science journalists.
Mm, mm,
I think one of the greatest difficulties of science writers in general across the world is to tread the line. You have to get people's interest piqued,
mm.
but you have to stick to the facts. And it often happens in science that the facts are not often as fantastically exciting as the general person out there would like them to be. I'm thinking of the news about the laser. Well, come on, help me, please. The um, uh,
Just
fusion.
oh,
Uh,
yeah. You mean cold fusion or
Cold fusion.
yeah?
That's right. So the news is, it is news and it is important, and it's important for people to understand it. But when the news broke and I saw the news, and fortunately I know that it's not always the way it's presented, because I'm a keen fan of Skeptics Guide to the Universe, where they often talk about science journalism,
Mm,
and excited. But I knew that this is not going to be the solution to load shedding within the next 2 years. And 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 then I dug into it, and I think it must be very difficult as a science writer, Elsabe, to get the general person out there who's not very knowledgeable excited enough without
Mm.
succumbing to the threat of or the yeah to clickbait.
mm.
And well, I think you do that quite well. I've read many of your articles, and it's telling a story about something that can be very mundane to the general listener out there. What do you say to that?
I know exactly what you mean. The thing I think is, first of all, to educate your news editor, not your editor, because a news editor is a person who actually is a person you work closely with. The editor is, in many cases, a lot of like a figurehead who signs off, but you have to like educate your news editor about the scientific method, and then you educate your audience and how science work. And I think when science becomes sensationalized is when you use breakthrough first. Those
Yeah.
things are
Mm,
so rare,
mm.
and
Yeah.
science is so different in a way, in inverted commas, from the rest of our lives experience. It's uncertain, and you will never get a science that will tell you we are 100% sure.
No.
The quackery industry, coming back to them, will give you something, a product, and say we are 100% sure that this will cure something. And if you don't take it, you will die. The scientist will tell you, say, well, we're testing this. Our margins are between this and this. And we're still testing, and this is going through a testing process. And I see science as a huge puzzle, which is being built through the ages from the Greeks and the Romans and to where we are today. And we're building those little puzzles. And when a puzzle piece doesn't fit, you take it out immediately, you acknowledge it. And if your peers can't build the same puzzle in the way you're building it, we know it's wrong. And you put it back again and you try again. And then that puzzle is going on and on and on and on. And it's self-correcting. While if you know something is fake, it's fake and it's not work, they will never, ever admit, if you don't take this micro mineral, that it's actually bad for you. Well,
I love that.
We're retracting it.
I love that analogy of the puzzle because I'm a keen puzzle builder myself.
Yeah.
So when you build a puzzle, you get a picture, which you don't have with science. You don't have a box that you can work from. And even if you have a picture, if you have quite a difficult puzzle, then it happens. A piece seems to fit perfectly, and you build that piece. And then when you're almost done, then you realize, oh dear, that piece that I thought was fit, it doesn't fit, and then you have to start all over again. And I think that's the one aspect of science that makes people very uncomfortable, especially in the modern life, because I think our lives, we experience life as much more certain than people of, say, 300 or 200 or even 100 years ago. So we want everything, all the answers to be there at the press of a button, because we think science works like Google, which it doesn't. and we have to, we're lazy to, as a society, to work through the answers. And it's like chipping away at an age-old mystery and almost creating the little puzzle pieces as you go along. I love that analogy. I'm definitely going to use it. I think you should write a piece about that, Elsabe. That's good analogy.
What we're into here is the difference, in my opinion, between science journalism and crime reporting. Because in crime reporting, you get sensational things happen and breakthrough news, and science doesn't give you that. Very, very rarely does science do anything like that. It's a slight improvement, and it may be or it may not be. You know, there's nothing sensational about it. But humans want sensation because that's what makes it worth reading. You know, and so there is a tension. It's not entirely on your side, because the example that Tercia brought to the table earlier about cold fusion, in that case, the two scientists involved, Fleischmann and Pons, they wanted the accolade of the announcement themselves. They wanted the glory to land on them. So they didn't go down the normal route. You know, the normal route would be peer review, get other people to replicate the experiment, see if you can get it published in a worthy scientific journal, and then 3 years later you might have something to report. They went straight to the newspapers and said, we've done this. And of course, it made sensational news. It was front page, big pictures and headlines. And it wasn't true, because it turned out that hardly nobody could actually replicate what they claimed. And still to this day, and we're talking about 30 years later now, people are still struggling to try and find out how that sort of thing works. But it's certainly not going to result in free electricity.
Yeah. The thing is that even you mentioned, it's interesting you mentioned the crime. I think people like to be wowed, but they also, we are creatures that do want certainties. In some instances, in other instances, we like mythical things, and we're okay with uncertainty. Even in crime, you get the facts, it's in court, but we don't get the answers we want from court. So I've seen that in court, and it's an interesting phenomenon. You will go to court, you'll get an answer, but we get the legal answer, guilty or not guilty. You don't get the why. You can forget. You can look at 100 crime documentaries. The person who's there seldom gives the reason why, and if it's a reason why, you can also doubt it. They don't give the answers. They stand there and in many of the cases never even testify themselves, because then they incriminate themselves. But ask them why. And we want of life, we want certain answers. And it's easy if you have a product that's off the shelf that promise to lower your glucose, and we know it don't work because it's never been through clinical testing. It's just a product that makes money, and it's easier to have a certain thing, and it tells you it will do it. And then we have a more difficult product, that's a pharmaceutical product that has been tested, but there are ifs and buts with it, and you have to do certain things to help it on, and it's still unsure. So we often go for the easier routes.
Yeah. Maybe it's the field of politics which does give us the real sensationalism, because there are actual resignations. We had one this week when Nicola, what's her name? Named after a fish. Nicola, no, the Prime Minister of, the First Minister of Scotland.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I do know who you're referring to. Yeah. Sturgeon.
Yeah. She resigned, and that was a genuine sensation. And that's the sort of thing that does sell newspapers and earns money for the printers and the publishers, and gets people to be loyal to a particular title of newspaper. And it seems to me that sort of eventuality is so rare in science that it can be fabricated on both sides, in order to capture attention. So, for example, take the expression "Big Bang." Now, that was coined by a scientist who had been doing research into the
Fred
early.
Hoyle,
Yeah, that's right. I think actually it was Gamow who came up with it, was it? But Hoyle popularized it.
Yeah.
But the thing is that became so pithy, such a good headline. It was an early clickbait, wasn't it? And
yeah.
But it's not a good representation of what actually went on. So although it was as you might call it, the original crime was committed by a scientist who came up with this phrase that is not a good scientific description, but then it was perpetrated wildly by all the media around the world, and everybody now thinks in terms of this explosion, which never happened.
I think what happened there is that the people who called it in the Big Bang said it in jest because they disagreed with the science. So the group that, when the science was put forward originally, it wasn't described as that. And then the two other men who disagreed with it ferociously, they hated the science. They didn't believe it. They didn't think that there was a singularity, and the whole universe expanded from this tiny little dot, and it just expanded so very quickly. They mockingly said, "Oh, there was a Big Bang," and that and I think that took on. But there are many examples of that. With the first stem cell work that was done, the word fetus should have never been mentioned. People took it on from there, and they thought it was little babies being plucked from their mothers, and people thought it was fetuses being used. That was, there are so many examples of the wrong terminology
Yes.
that became the wrong jargon for
Yes.
that specifically, and it's incorrect. And I think that leads to misunderstanding that you can. It happened with the early days of GMOs when it was referred to as frankenfoods.
Yes. Can I just stop you there? I want to talk about fetus. We'll come on to GMO in a minute, but I'm so glad you used the word fetus, because this has become so contentious, because people refer to it as a baby.
Yes.
It's not a baby. It might never become a baby. 1 in 4 is born dead, or suffers some terrible fate. And so please don't refer to the unborn as babies. That's where all this unnecessary emotiveness and conflict comes from.
Well, the stem cell research is not on babies. It's not even on. It's not even divided till you can. It's by the 8th division. That's what the work is being done of. In any case, it's not even being used anymore, because they use your own. If you need to, this very wonderful. Medicine that they make from your own, the biomedicine that they make, they can use it now from your own stem cells that they use, and they then regenerate that.
Wonderful new technology. Tercia, welcome back.
I was my son's computer just died. I don't know why, because there is electricity on a little bit. So John and I always, when we discuss things like evolution in particular, I missed out a little bit. I gather you were talking about stem cell research and things like that. But as a person who has a keen interest in science, but mainly works with words and teaching, I am always astonished at how complicated our choices of words are. No, not how complicated our choices of words are. The impact of one wrong word is incredible. And I was just made aware of that this week again. So I have new students, and I told them that they have to be curious, but I used the Afrikaans word nuuskierig, which is, and they looked at me, and the one guy in particular who's not a white South African, he said, nuuskierig? Why must we be nuuskierig? And he was clearly shocked. And I said, but what do you think I mean when I say you have to be curious? And he said, well, in his culture, the word nuuskierig, curious, means that you're actually nosy. It means that you are you disrespectful of people's privacy, and that you stick your nose where it doesn't belong. And there's a very definite negative connotation to the word nuuskierig, because it means that you also sticking your, not only are you disrespectful of people's privacy, you stick your nose in the business of people who might cause you danger if you stick your nose in their business. And I just thought again to myself, now imagine if a basic simple word like curiosity or curious can have such different connotations in different cultures. What do we make of a word like fetus or create or design? Whenever we speak about evolution, I always say even scientists will use the word design. And it just creates so much confusion, because we can never be 100% sure that the word that I use, and that to me has a very clear meaning, has exactly the same meaning to the next person. And I think as a science writer, that is something that you must be particularly aware of, Elsabe. And maybe, I don't know how much time you spend researching the correct terminology and teaching the correct terminology to your readers.
I think it's just all about reading and not bringing in emotion. And the emotion should come from human stories and not the facts. I think another important thing with communicating science is explaining the scientific method, how people got to from the beginning to the end result. And the other thing is the big difference between a hypothesis and a theory.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
And because evolution is just a theory, no, it's not. This one has been proven, and we know it, and it won't change. And gravity is a proven theory, and it's so beyond a theory now. It's a natural law, and the chances that gravity will be, I can't say 100% will be, disproven is very, very slight. So we know it now. So in also to use um, analogies to explain it. So why would we say, well, gravity is not working in the whole universe, but say this thing that we know is being proven over and over, then why do we say it's not? And if you sit on your stoop, like I often do, or a veranda, and I think about something, and it's my opinion, I haven't proven it. It's just something that goes on in my head. And what's happening with social media over and over and over again is it's fine. You can have an opinion, but it's not proven. So yeah, let's stick to that. I've often, some of these crazy calls that I've had is people who've told me, they've written to NASA. NASA's a favorite one. And they've written to NASA. NASA's not answering them. They have a theory about some kind of natural law that they know is wrong. And it's opinion, just remember that. If you go to a university and you hire a lab or something, or get in there and you can disprove to me that evolution is all wrong, okay, then we may think about it. And I had this woman who called me literally every second week, and she has this very aggressive theory that the cell phone tower next to her house is causing everything that's going wrong in the world, and she just didn't want to let go. And I was really, really relieved then when I left, that she couldn't call me anymore, because it's relentless, and that to me was just an opinion.
I'm laughing. That's so funny. But Elsabe, I'm looking at the time, and there's about 20 minutes left, and John is extremely strict about the time. And
Sure.
you said that science is about facts, and we should keep the emotion out of it. I don't think it's entirely possible that we can, but we have to try. And acknowledging that we can't is important. But that's my segue to ask you about your work into the life and work of Emily Hobhouse. So
So that's
from
got
the
nothing to
science,
do with science.
I know,
Okay.
I absolutely know. So I'm doing a 180, because I
Yeah.
do think that it is such an interesting topic, and I want to swing to the emotion and the emotional side, because I think there's also a misconception that people who are interested in science are not emotional and don't
Oh
care
yeah.
about emotions. And that's not true, because scientists are also human beings. And I mean, I'm a history fan, and I've always loved the story of Emily Hobhouse. And for some reason, it resonates with me, maybe because I grew up with stories about Emily Hobhouse and the Anglo-Boer War. John said that when I asked him about it, he said when he went to school, the Anglo-Boer War wasn't really something that they learnt about.
They
No,
wouldn't.
no, 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 no. When I went to school, it hadn't happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's 10 years now that I've started the research project on her. And it eventually led to a book being published in South Africa called Beloved Traitor. And then was later, the rights were sold in the UK, and the book was in hardcover called Emily Hobhouse, um, Traitor, Feminist, Pacifist, and the soft cover is called English Rebel Women. it's basically Emily Hobhouse was a very early pacifist and feminist human rights person, whistleblower. And during the Anglo-Boer War that was fought in South Africa from 1899 to 1902, she is a British woman. She came to the country. She heard about the war. She was anti the war, and she came to the country. She started a fund, the South African Conciliation Fund, and then later the Fund for the Distress of Women and Children. And she knew about the scorched earth policy that was done here. But when she landed here at the end of 1900, she did not know that there were concentration camps for women and children. And that set her back a bit, but she basically single-handedly was the one who brought the relief to the camps with food and clothes and traveling between the camps. But after 4 months, she realized that she can't keep up anymore, because by that time there were tens of thousands in the camps. And the reason they were put in the camps were twofold. The scorched earth policy was done because the Boer men went home to get replenished and get rations. And so if you burn down the farm and you kill all the animals, then they can't get replenished, and then the war would end sooner. And if you put the women and children in the camps, the British hoped that that would also lead to the end of the war, which it didn't. They thought the war would be over in 3 months, and it was nearly 3 years.
Yes.
And then she went back home and she wrote a 40-page report, which was circulated in the Houses of Parliament and all over. And eventually, a month later, it led to another commission to come and look at the conditions, and called the Fawcett Commission. And they basically, the report that she brought to the war minister at that time, St. John Broderick, he agreed with everything, but they never gave her the credit that she deserved. Obviously, they hated her, hence the word traitor. And then she went on, she came back to this country, she installed a ploughing and planting plan. She's opened spinning and weaving schools. And then eventually they asked her to help with the design of the Women's and Children Memorial Monument in Bloemfontein, which is the first war memorial honoring women and children who died in a war in the world instead of men. And she, at that opening, became ill, but her speech was read. She made the most profound speech about not, equity, gender, race relations, and how people should not, be kinder to each other and not humiliate each other. And then, in what little was known about her in this country, she then, after this First World War, she helped starving children in Leipzig. Yeah, and she was just an amazing, forward-thinking, innovative person for her time. And the writing of the book came many years after the last biography was written about her, because when nationalism rose in this country, I think a lot of people used Emily as, she came to help the enemy and she was pro-Boer, which she wasn't. She was actually against war, which is a big difference. And she was on the side of the suffering of women and children. That's basically in a nutshell.
Well, you may not be surprised to hear that the fact that the British invented concentration camps didn't feature very large in the syllabus being taught to me as a boy. But yeah.
No, it wouldn't.
No. Yeah, history is written by the victors.
Yeah, it wasn't deliberate, though. I mean, one shouldn't confuse it with what happened, the atrocities that happened in the Second World War, which was absolutely deliberate. This was just absolute mismanagement, poor logistics, and we just don't care, just dump them in the field. But still, they died more women in the camps than all the men combined, even from illness. I mean, it's about, if you look at both the black and white concentration camps of this war, of about 55,000 women and children, and the majority was under the age of 16. It's starvation and disease.
Wow. Yeah.
Lack of clean water and sanitation.
So do you only deal in print, in text, or because it seems to me there's an opportunity for a video style documentary about this woman who needs to be celebrated more?
Yeah, no, I obviously love that. The dream would be a miniseries, of course, with a British actress as the lead, because she wrote in the most lovely, lovely Victorian English, and yeah.
I wonder who would you like to cast as the lead role if your dream ever came true and you could have.
Oh, wow. What about? Oh, she would be lovely, Kate Blanchett. Even though
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Did Emily Hobhouse ever meet Queen Victoria? No, Queen Victoria died in 1900. Am I right?
she never met her.
Okay, but I can't see Queen Victoria really liking Emily Hobhouse. I think they were quite different in their points of view. Their worldviews were possibly quite different.
Yeah, but I think Queen Victoria did not have. I don't think Queen Victoria had a big say in the war. The war cabinet and minister. I mean, she absolutely hated Kitchener and he hated her. There are good correspondence between them and how they went at each other's throat. And obviously Milner. I mean, she did step back when she wanted to write a furious letters, and those letters are quite something to behold. I mean, there are absolutely no swear words in it, but she can set you back quite nasty if she wants to.
If you're smart, you don't need to swear.
Yeah, but that mean in the most upper class Victorian English, yes, she can write a letter to you and you'd feel afterwards, I'm going to curl up in a corner now.
Yes.
Did she get a lot of criticism from the British public?
Oh my goodness, yeah. I mean, if you read the book, it's absolutely, I mean, it's newspaper articles. I mean, I collected all of them that she was mentioned. There was over 400. And it's mostly the left-wing Liberal press, the Liberal Party press that wrote good things about her, like the Manchester Guardian at that time and others. But yeah, no, she was taken out completely. And then when she did it again in the Second War, where she was nearly arrested, and she was deported from South Africa when she tried to claim the second time during the war, she was arrested and deported under martial law.
I remember something like that. Yeah. Of course, she's I grew up with Emily Hobhouse as a hero in South African history. But were there nationalists who sort of tried to negate the role that she played because she was British?
That was not what happened.
Okay.
Remember, 50 years after the war, they tried to taint her image, in my view, by saying she was one of the enemy who came to help us, and she's this angel, and she's a social worker, but she wasn't. She didn't come because she wanted to. She took side. She came here because she wanted to clear the name of the English. She was patriotic to England. She didn't come because she was on the side of the Boers. She came because she was anti-war. And that got watered down through nationalism. They said, look, we've got an English lady on our side. She was not. She didn't care of the men on either side. She came to help the women and children because she thought, I mean, the title of her book was The Brunt of the War and Where It Fell. And the brunt of the war and where it fell was on the women and children, like in so many wars, who didn't have voting rights, who didn't have a say. She was fiercely feministic. I mean, if you read all her letters and all her books, and the things she say about men are definitely not, so she say things like the stupidity of men, the world affairs left in the hands of the stupidity of men, and things like if nothing in the world will ever be right if women don't have a say in it. Remember, she was born in 1860. And
when you're talking about Queen Victoria, I thought just that. I thought this is a different era. Back then, she may have been monarch, but she was still female. And that still conveyed in those days a sort of lower class of member of the population. She didn't have much to do with policy, you know. She had to be more or less arm twisted into agreeing to become Empress of India. She didn't like the idea, but the government did, you know.
Oh, well, Victoria loved extending the empire. She loved the fact that they will power. As somebody like Emily and the people she hung out was anti-empire, extending the empire. They called themselves Little Englanders. They they didn't like colonialism. They thought that they had no business conquering other lands.
So, Elsabe, would you see yourself as a feminist?
Of course. Until we're not all equal, there's a reason for us to be feminists and to stand up. I think there's not a single country in the world where people are equal 100%, except maybe who are moving towards this are the Scandinavian countries.
And
I mean,
it's interesting.
The bigger the difference is between not only in the way people dress and salaries and being accepted 100% in those countries, the more wealthy they are. And the larger the distinction is, the poorer it is. And that's been proven.
Yeah. Give women control. Yeah.
It's interesting how so I have 3 kids. My daughter is 21, and then I have a boy of 20 and a younger son. And we've often had this discussion where she will say, if she goes out with her brother, and my daughter she's an attractive girl, but she's not a typical girly girl, and she doesn't like flirting. She's competitive. She's so she always gets so angry because she'll go out to a club or somewhere with her brother often, or friends, and then she wants to play pool. And if she plays pool and a guy comes and knocks on the edge of the queue, he will see that as he's sort of flirting with her, and then she gets angry and she says, please don't do that. I'm playing pool and I'm playing to win. And she's always been, almost more than once, been in fights because the young men that she's playing with, or they think that she's playing pool because she's flirting. And she says it's as if they don't understand. I'm playing pool because I want to play the game and I want to see how good I am. And you know, her brother, and even to a lesser extent her dad, it's as if like, but why does it bother you? And she gets so angry. And I think
she's
those
Italian, why it bothers her.
And it's difficult to explain if you're not in the other person's skin. It's very difficult to explain how that works. And she's been so angry, and she says, and why do men feel that they have the right to a woman's body? Because she'll be playing pool and a guy will walk by and touch her bottom, and if she turns around and gives him a smack, then she's the one that causes trouble, you know. And this is not this is now. This is as we speak. And then people are inclined to say, yeah, but why do feminists? There's no reason to be feminist because men and women are equal. But you just need that type of interaction between men and women to show that, yes, in many ways, men and women are being treated equally. At least it's not like when my mom started teaching, a woman earned less money than a man for doing exactly the same job. And I'm talking about the 1970s. It's 50 years ago. And in fact, it stayed like that until about the 1990s. I think it was, I'm not sure when, that men in teaching got paid more than women in teaching.
Well,
and men, Sorry?
It's in all jobs, not only teaching.
Exactly. Well, I know about teaching, and something like when my parents started teaching, a woman couldn't get a permanent position. She could only be employed, get a temporary post. Only men could get permanent positions. Why? Because women are married, and if the man relocates, his wife will have to follow him, and also because women fall pregnant. So, you know, it's very interesting, this whole issue of feminism and how feminist we still should be, and how to do it. So yeah, interesting interesting conversation to end off on.
We should be extremely feminist. Look what's happening in Iran. Look what's happening in America, that women don't have a right over their own bodies. Look what's happening in Poland. Poland also took women's right over their own bodies away. I mean, we're taking steps backward, and people are still looked down on women in so many ways, women themselves. So yeah, it's far more complex than just you know turning around, slapping a person because he touches your bum is maybe not correct, but it's like, this is my body and you don't have a right to touch it unless I consent to it. But that
Exactly.
comes from a culture. Sexism and racism and homophobia, all these things becomes a culture. And it's up to everybody to change. It is also up to that guy's mates to tell him, hey, that's not okay.
Exactly.
Anyway.
And it's very difficult to change a culture that's so deeply ingrained, because what you are actually demanding that each person investigates why they do things, why they see people the way they see them. And it's people find that very uncomfortable, because you have to examine your own beliefs about who you are and where you fit into the world, and we're not particularly inclined to find that a comfortable thing to do. So that's why I try to focus on teaching critical thinking skills, because critical thinking skills begins by examining why I have the ideas that I have. Why do I hold particular ideas? We just accept that we have those ideas. Sometimes we don't even know what ideas we have in our heads. Never mind examining why we have those ideas and where they come from. We just act and don't think about, why do I think that this is appropriate um, for me to say or do. So yeah, I think we need to write more about that, and get them, especially in South Africa. We have a massive problem with gender-based violence, and in our traditional cultures, women are severely discriminated against.
It's in all our cultures. You should be surprised if you see the femicide statistics about who's killing who. It's everybody, and it's because we see women as property, and you can do with her what you want. It's all our cultures.
I wonder,
stand corrected.
as a former biology teacher, I wonder whether there's something more basic here. Do other animals have sexism, misogyny? I mean, you've got dogs, Elsabe. Tell us about them. Do you see any, differences between how they behave towards each other?
It's a very interesting question. I don't see that between them. I think it's a personality thing. When I look at them, their personality is different, and I don't link it to necessarily to their sex.
Well,
I don't know. It's they have a dominance thing, of course.
Yes, because a lot of mammals, apart from humans, are sexually dimorphic. Males are slightly bigger, or in some cases quite a lot bigger than females, which means that there is a tendency for the big one to push the smaller one around. Is this an evolutionary thing? If so, it's going to be very hard to stamp on it.
It is, but we have a small dog that pushes the big ones around.
Yes.
Is it a boerboel? I saw Sweetie Steve asked about the boerboel.
I don't have a boerboel. The boerboel is a typical South African breed. It's quite a large breed. I don't have quite a lot of knowledge from them about them, because I must say honestly, there's such a problem in this country about dogs being discarded, and we adopt dogs. So and they're normally smaller dogs because we have a small yard. But that's basically all I can say. That I know the Boerboel is a typical South African dog, but I don't think it's a bad breed. I think they're quite sweet.
I'm a cat person myself. I have 2 dogs, a Ridgeback and a typical oprag, a purebred dog. We have no idea what she is, but she's purebred dog. My daughter found her somewhere. So I'm hand raising 3. I'm fostering 3 kittens at the moment, as it is. They're due to get their milk again, and it's time for us to say goodbye because we've run our course of 1 hour. Elsabe, it was lovely to speak to you. John, maybe I can say something about one of our future shows, and Elsabe mentioned Iran. So I'm working.
Can I just announce next week's show first? Because
Yes,
your one will be chronologically later. So next week, viewers, we have a very interesting guest in the form of Thomas Levy, who he had what seemed to him to be a happy family, and then his wife got Jesus and left, and he's trying to raise his children single-handedly. He told us about this on social media some time ago. He's in the Chicago area. He was quite open-hearted about it. That's not quite the word I mean, is it? But he kept us informed about what was going on in his situation, and he's going to be our guest next week. Hopefully, he'll tell us all about it. Tercia.
Yes, so I wanted to say that you might be aware, I'm not on TikTok, but those of you who are, she has quite a big following on TikTok. It's a young Iranian-born American girl called Ariane Jasmine, and she has been organizing protests and support events to support the ongoing protests in Iran. She was, in fact, herself arrested in Iran. They lived there for about a year by the religious or the decency police. So she has been there. She's done that. And I'm working on getting her to be a guest on our show. So we are definitely at the Free Thought Hour. We are feminists to at least some degree, and we definitely we are pro-humanism and anti-discrimination of any kind. And watch the space because we hope to get, she has confirmed with me that she's keen. We just have to establish the date and follow the work that she does on TikTok. Ariane E with an E, Ariane Jasmine, who fights for the people in Iran, men and women who are standing up for the rights of women, because we are the Free Thought Hour and we believe that women and men should be free to think. And on that, Elsabe, it was lovely to meet you here in the midst of our former enemy, the Brit John Richards in East Sussex. And I'm hoping to come and have tea or coffee or a glass of wine on your veranda one of these days and get my copy of Beloved Traitors so that you can sign it.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
And thank you. And thank you, viewers, too.
Thank you, yes, for everybody.
Future viewers, too. See you next week. Say
bye-bye.
Thank you.